What's up, YouTube? Back at it with another video. Sorry about the hiatus. I just been busy with working. I'm so sorry. So I'm back with the videos again. And thank you so much for people who just been liking my stuff, the shorts. Thank you. And then thank you for the views on the Jalen Newman situation. Thank y'all. I appreciate y'all. Let's get this video to at least like 30 views. That's what we looking for. And this is the little Durk trial. I've been tuned in a little bit. So now I'm about to drop a couple videos on it because it's really getting interesting now. So now I know everybody in tune with what's been happening with the jam situation with Vonnie and stuff like that. And we know Brian Steele, one of the best lawyers, been our lawyer, so we know what he doing with this situation. So now we about to go watch this video with me. You feel me? And we just about to tune in because Trap Lil Ross been out there, and I heard the Dirt fans been trying to beat his ass and shit. So this is really just a funny time we living in, all the court cases and everybody just getting all the trials and stuff. So we about to go watch this. And thank you for everybody who been showing love. Like, comment, subscribe, everything counts, everything help. We about to go watch this video.
Oh my gosh, I cannot believe what I've seen today. This is going to be a long video, people, okay? Strap in, get ready, all right? It's going to be absolutely wild. I'm going to tell you everything that went down from OTF Jam's testimony day 2, and what you're not ready for, people, is... it was a back and forth, okay? This video, I'm going to break down all of my notes. This is the closest thing you're going to get to the transcript before the transcripts come out, okay? Shout out to all of the people that be going through the transcripts. I'm hearing the transcripts are popping off, all right? They're coming out in the late, early hours after the sessions. I'm hitting you with my handwritten notes. I have calluses on my fingers. My thumb is literally swollen. You can't see it, but my thumb is literally swollen. It hurts.
Bro, right? Everything. No funny.
I'm in pain, okay? I'm getting one of those little lumps on the side of this finger. I don't know if you can see it. I'm not trying to swear at you guys. I'm not trying to do GDK either, but I'm literally, bro, I feel like I'm in school again, okay? I'm trying my hardest to write down literally everything that was said, and I'm going to get to it. Now, before I get into it, I want to make it clear, okay? Everybody's been hating, saying you're wrong, you be lying, you be infactual. I'm just going to give you the best notes that I could possibly take. Not everything's going to be perfect. Some things are going to be wrong. There were some things that I wrote down that then were contradicted later on. I don't know if the person was lying or if I wrote it down wrong. It is what it is, okay? I'm just going to tell you what I thought I heard in the courtroom. If anything's wrong, I apologize. But I'm going to do my best to be accurate. If anything's wrong, I'll correct the record, all right? Just let me know. It's cool. It's okay, all right? We don't need to hate each other. We need more love in this world, okay? It was crazy. Tell you who wasn't getting love on that stand was OTF Jam. So in the first half of the day, they'll end on a big drum.
Picked a great main, but your voice doesn't quite match it?
We have a fix.
Voice mod gives you over 100
dramatic note, and then suddenly it's like, boom, you got to tune in next time. They ended yesterday's testimony. They had caught Quando at the Level Hotel in Los Angeles. They'd seen him outside. They tricked him into coming outside because of the weed man. They're saying Didi literally had Quando in his crosshairs of his gun, said I could kill you right now. It'd be so easy. But they were saying cops was rolling by every minute. And they were like, it's too hot. We shouldn't do it. Now, what was super crazy is they left us on that bombshell, on that cliffhanger, and they continued today, okay? I might just take my last couple vitamins before I even get into this because I need the energy. I'm trying to get on my health shit. Last thing I need to do is catch a cold and miss a few days of the trial. I'm not going to lie. There was one person in the courtroom that definitely had some sniffles. So I would implore everyone to look after your health, man. Take your vitamins. I'm a big proponent of vitamins. I take all type of vitamins, okay? If you want my vitamin stack, tap in the comments. But it was crazy, okay? It was crazy. And don't get me wrong, this is one of those videos where I'm going to give both sides, and it was honestly a balanced day. I would say Durk was getting cooked in the first half, and in the second half, OTF Jam, it was a battle. Brian Steele was cooking him. He was cooking Brian Steele back. But anyway, let's get into it. So Jam continued. They said that night at the Level Hotel, all right, they said that Cuz basically, you know, went with all of the hitters back to their own hotel.
This shit fucking crazy. This nigga OTF Jam snitching. What they call a nigga? OTF Jammy the Bull. But no, this shit crazy though. Like, bro. And I heard everybody just pin that shit on Durk and shit. Man, I don't know how he coming out this situation. He do, bro. He gonna have to be on his shit, the best behavior, better stay out the way. But still, I heard the Fed trying to, after this, they trying to put a RICO on him too. So I don't even know how he getting out these sticky situations. But hopefully he do though.
was staying at a hotel that was near Disneyland. Cuz or Dee Dee had basically walked the hitters to their rooms, and apparently they left the guns on the table in the hotel room. When they woke up, all right, it was basically all 5 of them together in that room. Now, I don't know if it was one big hotel room, a suite. They didn't get into that. I don't know if Durk ain't got the budget for dudes. They're probably on twin rooms. You know what I'm saying? I don't really know, but it didn't sound like they were living the lap of luxury, or obviously. But after that, they basically left the hotel. Jam said he didn't recall if they discussed the previous night having Quando in the crosshairs, but basically they left the hotel and they went to the level to try and catch Quando. And look, I did a bunch of updates earlier on Instagram, on TikTok. Obviously, follow me there if you're not already. I'm sure you already are if you're here. But there's a bunch of things that I couldn't even like. I'm seeing myself on TikTok right now. There are a bunch of things that I couldn't even really like get off my chest quick enough when I was outside the courthouse. Okay, so it was actually quite a lot of stuff that was going on. And let me just check something real quick. All right, my bad. I had to go and eat some food. But anyway, okay, we heard this testimony that they had Quando Rondo in the crosshairs. They then went to his hotel the next morning and they continued to kind of like, you know, just wait outside, wait next to his Escalade. They were talking about how they kind of changed cars a bunch of times. They're saying that Vonnie came back with the BMW. They all went to the Level Hotel. Jam was in the Infinity with Boogie, Flockett, and Lindsay. Dee Dee was in the BMW with Vonnie. Jam identified the BMW outside the Level Hotel from footage. Said, yeah, that's the car from the footage they showed him. And they said if it wasn't so busy, they'd have shot him outside the Level in the morning. But it was busy. They said it was a lot of people walking around. They'd already decided yesterday that it was too hot. All right. They just said, look, killing him here ain't really.
This nigga's a dangerous type of nigga. If a nigga can kill without hesitation, and then nigga be snitch without no hesitation, the dangerous niggas, this shit fucking crazy.
Gonna fly. And they pretty much went from place to place going through that same thing. He said he doesn't remember who said what, but just generally the consensus among the group was that it was too crowded and that they couldn't have that conversation, so that they couldn't commit that murder. That was the conversation, but he didn't know who said what. So they followed Quando's Escalade after this to the Litco dispensary. They said that they noticed Quando's truck outside. They noticed that it pulled inside, and Jam even said, I knew that it was there. I remember that. They showed him a surveillance image. He said, I remember there was a truck. It's like, looks like a Hellcat Durango or something, like a Dodge with a stripe down the middle of it, like a double stripe over the top of it. And he said, I remembered that striped truck. He said, I thought Quando's car was closer to the exit. And then they showed him another video from the surveillance where the car was closer to the exit. And he was like, yeah, that's how I remembered it. So basically, they said they considered killing Quando in front of the dispensary. They basically showed the footage or the still images of the Infinity, the slider car kind of circling around. And basically, Jam said, yeah, that was us sliding around, that was us circling the block. He said that Jam and Lindsay got in the BMW with Dee Dee, and Cuz, as well as CVL Shorty, they basically, hang on a sec. Yeah, they basically said that they was, CVL Shorty, or Lindsay, was apparently going to go in the dispensary to see if Quando and them were there. They were all in the cars discussing the plan. It sounded like they were on kind of a FaceTime communicating between the cars. And they basically sent Lindsay in to do the reconnaissance. He apparently went in. He said that he saw that Quando was in the building in the back. He said, I could see them, but there was armed security there. They said they asked if anyone heard from Durk around this time. And actually, interestingly enough, Jam said, I don't know nothing. Don't know, can't say if anyone else heard from Durk. He didn't hear from Durk. So there wasn't communication with Durk during that period of time, apparently. He said that they was in the car for a while. They were sat there in the heat with hoodies on. And he said that they looked mad suspicious. Everyone in the car was like, we looking mad suspicious. So they had second thoughts about doing it at Litco 2, and they ended up parking at another spot. They said they ended up in what they described as like a church school parking lot. I don't know if it was a church or a school or a church school. I don't know. But definitely, you know what I'm saying? I don't know, maybe that would have been a good time for Jesus to step in and maybe give them a change of heart. But it said that they got out of the car and they all spoke. And apparently they were all talking about this situation. And Jam, I don't know if he was saying he said this or this was what other people said about the conversation. But he basically said, like, this shit didn't feel right. We were scrambling. This isn't going to go wrong. He had a bad feeling about everything. Jam said that he said to the CVL, Shorty, Flocker, and Boogie, he said, this don't feel right. He said, like, police interference is going on, that we're going to get caught if we do this here. There's too many cops around. This just ain't going to work. So Jam apparently texted Dee Dee at this point and said, man, bro, Flocker and them are scared. They too jittery.
So Jam was saying he had a bad feeling by doing that shit. But he still could, like, I see what the nigga come from, but niggas He's trying to get out the shit. That's what it is.
I think we should do it with them. And he basically said, I tried to call it off. All right. He was hoping that Didi would call it off. He said, I know they really want to do it. And Didi calling it off is one thing, but Jam is another. He basically said that he felt like the only person that could call this off was Didi. He said that Didi had a stronger relationship with Durk than him. Didi was the only person that could pull the brakes on this situation. He said he felt Didi and Durk was close and shit. He thought that Durk obviously would feel a type of way, but he knew that he wasn't comfortable being the one calling it off. He was too low in the hierarchy on this situation, and Durk was too thirsty for the hit to put his hand up and say, I don't want this to happen. He said, I felt it was dangerous to stop. If I stopped the killing, it would lead them to kill me. He said, they flew me to LA. I didn't even know how to book a flight. He said, these people were my way out, my way around. I didn't know what was going on. He said he felt like that Durk wouldn't have Didi killed if Didi called it off. He said Didi and Durk were more like brothers. They had a different type of bond. He said that Flocka and Lindsay seemed scared. They seemed kind of like worried about it. Jam said he was closest with Boogie. That was his homeboy he spent a lot of time with. And he basically said that he told Didi, he said, these guys ain't ready. He said numerous times, I tried to call it off. And apparently Didi didn't even reply to Jam. He said that they then got a call that Quando was apparently leaving the dispensary. They were supposed to get back on top of them, but for a brief period of time, the BMW lost Quando Rondo and both cars actually scrambled. But it seemed like they kind of eventually found them. The BMW sent Flocka their location. Jam kind of described, dropping a pin, sharing where they were at, and then they kind of met back up again and continued. Now, Jam identified pictures of Quando's Escalade with the Infinity right next to it, and Jam said we pulled up right next to the truck 6-7 times, all right? He said they discussed shooting the vehicle in traffic, doing a drive-by, but they said drive-bys don't always hit people. They wanted to be certain that Quando was actually there getting hit. They said they had a discussion in the car about doing a drive-by, and the two cars were on the phone with each other, probably FaceTime, but we don't know. He said they all then went to the vape store. They were then back in traffic when Quando...
My bad. His one a little too much is talking. I'm trying to hear more action. Shit kind of got me on a little bit. All right.
Who's out here with the Free Durk gang? The Free Durk gang are outside. I'm not going to lie, it's a less hostile crowd today. Maybe that's because Brian Steele just got up there and put some belt to ass to Jam. I'm not going to lie. We heard a lot from Jam yesterday. I feel like everybody takes their anger out on me. Like, I'm not Jam, okay? I'm not the one testifying against Durk. I'm just trying to give the facts. But what's going on is it seems like people are cool with me. People are cool with me when Brian Steele is putting belt to ass, and that's what was going on. Brian Steele went absolutely crazy on OTF Jam. There were moments that Steele seemed like he was whooping Jam. He caught him in a couple of lies. Yeah, everybody, who's lying, who's telling the truth? Jam said a couple of things this morning that didn't add up to what he said this afternoon when Brian Steele was questioning him. So I ain't gonna lie, we see him why Brian Steele making those millions. He went pretty hard on Jam. He caught him in some contradictions, and I'm not gonna lie, Brian got pretty personal on Jam at certain points. He said a few comments to basically like call him out, saying like, this is what you do, you're a cold-blooded killer. They even said to him, there was one moment where the judge kind of like, was basically saying, you get into the philosophy now, because Jam was basically saying, look, if I didn't kill Pab, if I didn't participate in this, I didn't know what I was even meant to be doing until I was flown out there. And if I said, no, where I'm from, if you stop someone getting killed, that's what gets you killed. And so Brian Steele was hitting him with these philosophical questions, being like, oh yeah, well then what makes you think that your life was worth more than somebody else's? This is just what you do. You're a cold-blooded killer. It was pretty crazy, but I'm not gonna lie, I'm gonna give you a whole bunch of updates from my notebook in separate videos. But Brian Steele went ballistic on Jam, but Jam had a few good moments where he kind of clapped back, and I'm not gonna lie. Everybody comparing this to the YSL Woody situation. Jam's smarter on that stand than Woody. No disrespect to Woody. I know Woody don't like me anyway, so it is what it is. But at the end of the day, I feel like Jam, a lot smarter, he a lot slicker. He low-key was disrespecting Brian Steele at certain points. And Brian Steele was disrespecting him back. There were a few things that sounded kind of improper. I was a little bit confused by some of the things that were being allowed to slide. But at the same time, you see why Brian Steele worth them millions, okay? He was looking sharp up there. There was a lot going on. Yesterday, it was like he was throwing a bunch of tantrums, objecting to everything. The government didn't really object too many times. They let Brian Steele have his way. They seemed pretty confident in what Jam was saying. Jam seemed pretty confident in what he was saying, but there were a few times that he got tongue-tied. So I'm going to break down all the little specific little skirmishes that happened between Brian and Jam in a bunch of separate videos. So I'm going to get to that straight after this. But you know what I'm saying? Shout out to the Free Durk crew. There's definitely a much more...
That's why they pay that nigga the big bucks. You feel me? Cause belt to ass. Dude, we live in a crazy ass time right now, y'all. There's so many trials.
Positive vibe out here today, man. I was getting all kinds of like, weird things said to me yesterday, but it's almost like because Brian Steele put in work, maybe I'm safe today. So shout out to Brian Steele, man. You know what I'm saying? You saved me today. But I don't know if Brian Steele gonna walk past soon. I saw him walk out yesterday, but hey, he killing it out there, man. Stay tuned for more updates. Okay, so one of the alleged lies that apparently was told by OTF Jam that was getting called out by Brian Steele apparently related to his family and the fact that he claimed that he was given help. Now, I told you guys earlier that OTF Jam said something where he was kind of probably trying to elicit a little bit of sympathy, where he basically said that he became the man of the house at 12, same age that he started doing shootings, and that he basically was putting food on the table. He was robbing people. He said that he was an armed robber, he said he was an armed robber, not a strong arm robber. And at some points, things got so real for him and his family, he had to literally stick people up with guns for food, okay? Well, Brian Steele and them kind of clapped back, and they basically, look, I was 15 minutes late. There was a lot of difficulty getting the media into the room, but we got...
Nigga had that pistol, and nigga be like, bitch, give me that burger, bitch. Oh my gosh.
Into the room 15 minutes, so I didn't see
Bitch,
how
give me that
the
burger.
prosecution's examination of Jam ended.
Give him a
But
Taco
what we
Bell,
did see
bitch.
is I basically walked in there and Brian was already on his ass, all right? He was already putting belt to ass, and the first thing I heard was Brian Steele say, hey, you never really supported your family, did you? Jam said, hey, if my mom was here, she would tell you. And then basically there were a bunch of sidebars, and what was crazy, something was going on, something improper had been said, they weren't happy about it, and there was a bunch of sidebars. What was crazy, I'm not gonna lie, Jam laughed, he was laughing and shaking his head. People were talking about he was shaking his head before, I see that, but hey, people were acting like he was shaking his head like, man, I can't believe I'm telling. Nah, he was laughing, shaking his head, looking at Durk. Him and Durk were looking at each other, smiling at each other, low-key on some like, yeah, I got you, like, hey, all right, we're gonna see my lawyer finna beat your ass on the stand. And what was basically crazy is that Brian Steele was forced to move on. But we actually heard at the end of the day, after the jury had left the room, apparently Brian Steele is trying to get some information across that the prosecution are having an issue with. But Brian Steele allegedly and the defense, they're trying to basically make this case that apparently Jam's family hate him. Apparently, like, he's hated by his family. None of them are here. The judge was like, look, we don't want to be over here talking about, like, why his family aren't in the court. It's not really fair to say, why aren't your family in the court? There's multiple reasons they could be there. They could be scared. They could be, not there because, they feel like it's too far to travel to California. They could be sick. So them not being there doesn't say anything, but it's like trying to make this case that Jam's family hate him is going to be difficult. So that kind of wasn't allowed, but it sounds like that might come back. They might find another way to attack Jam's character, but literally from the get-go, they were putting belt to ass, and Jam was laughing, shaking his head, looking over at Durk. They were looking at each other. That was wild, but there was a lot more, and Jam went back and forth with Brian Steele. Brian Steele beat him up a little bit, and then Jam kind of hit him back. It was crazy. So stay tuned for more updates. I've got a lot more coming. So Brian Steele went down a pretty predictable path of trying to attack OTF Jam today. It didn't quite go his way, but he definitely did make a good point. One of the most obvious things that we knew we was going to hear regarding Jam was obviously his cooperation. Now, he's copped out to 3 murders, and, obviously he's expecting something in exchange for cooperating and, trying to help put Durk away. Now, Brian Steele said, you're testifying under an agreement, right? You hope to be released. And then Jam was basically like, not released, I'm looking for something. And then Brian Steele's like, do you want to be incarcerated? He said, look, you do the crime, you do the time. I just don't want the rest of my life, though. He basically said, I want to be free at some point, and he would refuse to say that he was expecting a specific amount of time. He basically just said, look, I want numbers, I don't want my whole life. And Brian Steele was hitting him back. He said, hey, well, I heard that you told one of your loved ones that you only expect to serve 18 months. And Jam was like, someone I love? What? Who are you talking about? He said, you told your wife on a jail call you was only expecting to be in there for 18 months and you're going to be in home for for one of your kids' birthdays. And he basically said, I don't remember saying that. I don't know what you're talking about. And it was interesting because it's like, I thought Brian Steele was about to introduce some evidence to that, but then he didn't. He kind of moved on. But then he continued on talking. I'm not going to lie. I think he was striking fear into the hearts of the jury. The idea that this guy who allegedly, well, not even allegedly, he's admitted to catching 3 bodies, might just be back out here on the streets. But it was basically made clear that
That's the shit. Why he get paid? Like I told y'all earlier, all you gotta do make accusations is make that killer look like he's a bad guy. You feel me? So the juries will feel some type of way. Be like, oh yeah, he did that shit on his free will type shit. You feel me? Smart nigga.
He wasn't planning, he wasn't expecting to be out soon. You know, Brian Steele's saying, what, you thought you could manipulate your way to get out of custody? You've been in and out of custody your whole life. You understand the criminal system, you're street smart. He said, I'm street smart, but I never said I understood the criminal system. So another thing that Brian Steele said, he said to Jam, he said, look, now you're on the witness stand, you're hoping you'll get back on the street. Apparently Jam said, yeah, I guess. And they said, well, you're the reason why Durk's in court. And after that, he basically said, well, no, I just told the truth. Brian Steele said the truth's going to be decided by the public or the jury, and then he said you're begging and hoping for a guilty verdict on Durk so that you can get out. Jam clapped back, he said, no, I'm not, I'm just here admitting my side and being honest. Brian Steele said, you want to go home? Jam said, look, I just want a number, I want to go home at some point. Brian Steele said, you want to go home immediately. You realize what you did, you were on this crazy mission to do murder and you're trying to get out of it. So look, to be honest, I feel like it was kind of very interesting. I feel like maybe Brian still thought that it was going to land harder, this whole thing of like, you're just cooperating to get out of this. But look, Jam was prepared. Jam was coming a lot more prepared than YSL Woody when it came to this questioning. Jam seemed to basically be arguing, look, I'm not expecting to get any specific amount of time. And there was even mentioned afterwards, I think there was one point where Jam actually said, look, like, judge could give me life if he wants to. Like, I don't know, I've not got any agreement. And so it's going to be very interesting to see what he ends up getting. Apparently, he might still get some time off, even if Durk doesn't get convicted. So that was Brian Steele's angle. I don't think it necessarily landed perfectly, but like it was interesting. So there was a crazy moment in court when Brian Steele was cross-examining OTF Jam, and Brian Steele was definitely putting in some work. He was really doing his best to trash Jam's character, and he got off some very interesting points. He obviously got him to, you know, retell the situation where he had allegedly done like hundreds of armed robberies, over 100 armed robberies. And he basically very dramatically retold the story of OTF Jam's first alleged body when he was 17. He basically said, and it was very interesting, he was talking about, you know, you do armed robbery, you take advantage of situations for your benefit. Jam said, you got to explain what you mean a bit better. It's so funny because then Brian Steele said, well, look, you might want to take my watch. And then Jam said, I never stole a watch in my life. You just made up a story. What are you talking about? So OTF Jam was a lot more feisty on the stand than other people that we've seen. But Brian Steele basically told the story very dramatically. Obviously, he's very good at telling stories and building a narrative. He said at 17, you went to a store, you locked the door, you trapped your victim with you and your armed friend. Jam clapped back. He said, nah, it was only me that was armed. He said you had your gun loaded. You didn't know if the person in there had a family. You knew nothing. You just wanted to get what you wanted.
Imagine being able to build an app with your name on it, just by thinking about it. Meet Base 40.
And he said that when that clerk didn't want to be under your control, what did you do? Jam said, I killed him. And Brian Steele said, not just that, you blew his brains out. That was very, very dramatic, but obviously I see what he's trying to explain. Now, Brian Steele said, when you blew his brains out, he said, Jam said, yeah, I blew his brains out. When Brian Steele went on, he said, did the brains get all over you and the gun? And Jam went, well, no, that's not what happened. So Brian's still painting this picture, and Jam kind of like, bro, that's not how it went down. There wasn't no brains on me and the gun. Like, that's crazy. But then Brian still said, that's what you do. After he said you blow people's brains out, that's what you do. Jam said, well, that's just your opinion. And he said, you let him lay and linger. And Jam was like, what, you trying to say I didn't do CPR? But Brian Steele, he basically said, you slaughtered a human, you took his property, and he drove back to Chicago and bragged. And Jam said, I didn't brag about it. Brian said, you thought about it? Jam said, I actually did. They said, what did you do about it? And he said, I thought about it and I called a gang meeting. They said, you ever meet with the victim's family? He said, nah. Brian Steele said, you just went on with your life. It didn't bother you? And he said, no, it did bother me. That's why I called a gang meeting. But then that was dramatically followed by him saying, you killed other people. Jam said, who? He said, Lil Dean. Jam said, you know I didn't murder him, right? And then suddenly there was a sidebar. That kind of kicked off a whole fury in the courtroom. There was then a private conversation. After that, it was made clear, basically they went back and forth. And Jam said, this was a kidnap resulting in death. I pled guilty, but I didn't pull the gun. I didn't kill him. I didn't even see him get shot. And later on, Brian Steele asked him about the Lil Pab incident and basically said, you flew out there, you didn't know, but when you were told in Hooters that you were going to kill Quando, you went along with it. Brian Steele said, murder is in your heart. It was crazy. And Jam laughed and he just went, no, it's not. And Brian said, you don't care who you hurt. He said, yes, I do. So Jam's saying that he got a heart, even though he got 3 bodies. And, you know, he's still out here. All right, so look, one of the interesting things that came up was kind of this big argument that OTF Jam was trying to make, that he didn't really want to murder Quando Rondo. Obviously, it ended up killing Lil Pab. That he didn't really want to do it. He didn't get told until he landed in California.
This shit is just crazy. Like, I ain't never seen this, but I know my grandparents sent me the bull and the nigga was snitching and shit. I just find it funny that he could snitch right now. He probably still do a life sentence. You feel what I'm saying? So like, it's just like he just snitching just cause type shit, cause he feel bad type shit. So this shit is fucking ridiculous. This shit crazy. This is why I'm just so flabbergasted. No words could explain, to be honest. Like, this is the type of shit you see on movies and shit. This shit like real life now. So like, pray for Lil Durk, everybody.
That's what they were there for, that's the purpose that they were there for. And he kept making this argument that, like, if I didn't go along with it, where I'm from, if you stop someone killing someone, that gets you killed. Now, Brian Steele had a lot to say about that. He's saying that the facts don't really match up. He's saying that you didn't backtrack, you didn't try and stop, you had no hesitation. You landed in California, got told the plan, and your to-do list was one thing: murder. And it was interesting because he was like, look, you only even opened up and kind of, cooperated about this when you got arrested for a gun and you was trying to get out that jam. He was saying you didn't self-surrender. Your guilty conscience didn't get the better of you and cause you to walk into a police station. And he basically went on to say you didn't try and stop it. He said, I texted Dee Dee. I was trying to stop it. I didn't say stop it, but I was trying to say it's too hot. These guys ain't prepared. We don't know these guys like that. And basically, they're saying, why didn't you stop it? You're meant to be a high-ranking BD minister. You're the highest, most dangerous rank that you can possibly be. Jam clapped back. He said, look, not every minister is dangerous. And then Brian Steele was like, well, you're dangerous. And then Jam was just like, not all ministers are dangerous. And Brian Steele said, well, if you texted Dee Dee a bunch of stuff trying to stop the murder, where are those texts? Why can't you show it? He said, I can't. So I don't have my phone. I don't have them texts. And then Brian said, well, as a BD minister, you could have given the gun back and walked away. Jam said, it's not that easy. Obviously, he said previously that he was mad at Durk. He said, I don't know why they called me. I'm not the only minister. But he said, when I came home from jail, OTF was everything and Durk was the leader. Brian Steele said, yeah, well, according to you, but if you had a conscience, you could have just left. Jam said, it's not that easy. Brian Steele said, what, you'd rather kill a human that you didn't know than walk away? Jam said, or get killed myself. And Brian said, what, you think you're more important than the people you kill? Jam laughed and said, no. There was a funny moment where Brian said to Jam, he said, look, you're a dangerous man, right? And he said, you're objectively a dangerous man. Jam said, I don't know what objectively means. He said, you're dangerous, like right now. And Jam laughed, he went, I'm chilling. Later on, Brian Steele basically said, why do you feel like other people should die so you don't have to die if you felt like you would be killed if you, walked back from this? And basically, they were kind of talking about that. They kind of went back and forth about that. And then they said, why didn't you, why didn't you stay at the scene? Like, if you were that worried. He said, look, obviously I'm not going to stay there. Nobody would just stay at the scene after committing a crime like that. No one would do that. And Brian Steele said, well, you're different. You're not like everybody else. This is what you do, Mr. Minister. And basically, like, Jam laughed at that point. He said, yeah, I'm different for sure. And then he pointed at Dee Dee and he said, well, he a minister too. And then Brian said, well, you're a professional. Jam said, we're not professionals. We're just paying attention to the situation. So there were some pretty insane claims about disrespect that Jam had apparently showed to Durk when he was being cross-examined by Brian Steele. Now look, I don't know how true this was, and Jam denied everything. But Brian Steele made a very interesting point, right? And you could tell he was onto some shit, because Brian Steele basically brought up a woman's name. I won't say her name, all right, because it's not really important. But he basically said, you came back out of jail, you said you had no money, Durk sorted you out some clothes, and you put your parole to an address. It was a woman's address. Brian Steele said the name and Jam laughed. He went, yeah. They said, you lived at her house. He said, look, I used her crib as a parole site, but I wasn't really living there. And they basically said, you had a sexual relationship. He said, we hooked up once, all right? Jam's basically saying, like, look, something was going on with me and her, all right? So Brian Steele basically said, look, you think she's a good person, right? Yeah? Jam said, yeah, she's a good person. And then Brian Steele dropped the bomb. He said, did you tell her that Durk is your bitch? He said, I never said that. And then Brian Steele said, you told her Durk is a hoe. He said, never. And then Brian Steele said, by the time you got out, Durk's career was booming. And you said that he owes you because he used your name in so many songs. He basically, Jam kind of kicked off. He was like, that makes no sense. How could I be responsible? How could I be claiming that I was responsible for his success? He only mentioned me in a couple of songs. They weren't even his biggest songs. That ain't making no sense. He was clapping back at Brian Steele. Then Brian Steele said, I know. This was crazy. He was like, this ain't making no sense. Brian Steele was like, I know, you often don't make sense. It was like, oh, that was a burn. Brian Steele then clapped back.
He's just trying to roast him. Just to make him have a bad character for the jury. Smart man.
Said, you said that Durk works for you. Jam said, no, I didn't. He said, you said that you were going to get rich from Durk. He said, no. He basically said you were in a studio in Atlanta, Durk took you and others to that private room, and that's when they told you Quando has to be killed. So it was kind of like he set him up with a bunch of stuff that he was going to then deny, and then he hit him with the big doozy, which was obviously this whole thing about, you know, Durk had said that there was $1 million bounty, all of that kind of stuff. And basically, he was saying that, you know, that's what you said in your testimony, right? But you didn't say it in your interview. Now, that was crazy. He kind of caught him in a lie. And then they played a segment of a recorded federal interview with OTF Jam. And basically, he said that Durk had actually never spoken to him about Quando, never spoken to him about no bounty, that they hadn't had the conversation about that before the murder. It was a big contradiction, and it made Jam look really bad. In light of all the stuff that he had just said, they brought up a bunch of statements of him disrespecting Durk, basically painting the picture.
He got a Eric took a win and losses. What was it, like yesterday? So shit.
That he denied of like being jealous of Durk's success and thinking Durk's a hoe and thinking he was gonna get money out of Durk.
All right, that's the end of that video. Like, comment, subscribe, share, all that would help. I'm about to work on the next video, so tune in to the next video, and hopefully he dropped this shit today so I can go react to it, cause I know it's gonna be really good. Cause that's when he back on the thing. I think Brian's still gonna cook him again and shit. So thank you for everybody who been watching my stuff and just comment, subscribing. I appreciate y'all so much. Have a good day.